What is going on, y'all? KMBest here. I have been cruising up in top 50 with an Omega Sentinel hybrid list that I actually think is legitimately the best deck I've ever played with Omega Sentinel in it. And not only that, is actually using her quite powerfully. I think a lot of the time when you look at a deck like this, you're like, KM, you're being ridiculous. You put Omega Sentinel and Jocasta into the IWFS deck and called it an Omega Sentinel deck, but it's probably not even good. And to that I say, I think that Omega Sentinel is actually amazing here. Now, I got this list from Derek, and Derek was a player that I had a lot of conversations with about how this list should shape up. I wanted to play a bunch of other cards. I wanted to play Danger. I wanted to play all this other stuff that was not Omega Sentinel. But the first time you hit minus 35 on your opponent's board with a bunch of lasers, you're gonna feel the power of Omega Sentinel. She is an entire win con unto herself. When you are doing a Jocasta Prodigy lane, she is going to absolutely nuke your opponent's board. It is extremely powerful in terms of point output in a deck like this. And it is effectively, I realize this is a little bit over-exaggerating, but it did feel like this. In exchange for being one more cost than Invisible Woman First Steps, she's like a similar amount of points, except for the fact that she doesn't require units for those points to go on. And I think also she has a lower ceiling because of cards like Sunspot, but still, like, it is really, really, really good to be able to play just some kind of mid-rangey game plan and then send 5 Omega Sentinel lasers across the board. That's the kind of thing that can win you games when you don't draw your combo. So there's a couple of like combo end games in here. There is Jocasta, card, Prodigy, Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel could be that card. That's definitely one of them. The same thing with Jocasta, Prodigy, and IWFS. Same kind of combo endgame. Prodigying IWFS is also perfectly acceptable when you're not drawing Jocasta. That is still going to be plenty of power. That is generally how you want to set up your end game. You're just trying to do one of these stupid combinations of cards, and then the rest of your deck is actually like very relevant and powerful tech pieces. You'll notice that this deck manages to be able to be a version of the Mobius Mercury list. And I think largely what happened here is we just got more points into the deck. Previously, IWFS was really being crowded out of the marketplace of those decks by a bunch of Gwenpool Mysterio decks that were just able to do more points. But now we have multiple combo lines that make this deck an incredibly powerful deck that can deploy a ton of points and still play tech. Now, there is a little bit of tension because you really want to be playing one of your threes when you can. You want to be playing Jocasta on 3. You want to be playing IWFS on 3, whichever one you have. And that can give you some tension with Mobius. So sometimes you have to weigh, like, how good is my combo this game versus how much is Mobius preventing them from having to do, which is not something you have to worry about in the other builds of IWFS. But I do think that generally speaking, this is taking an already powerful shell and hooking up a giant laser hand on it like the Death Star. Sunspot is your combo enabler, I guess would be the right thing to say. He's not very good in normal games, but if you are able to get your big boy combo off, i.e. Jocasta into IWFS, prodigying the Jocasta, he is just sort of arbitrarily large. It's an unbelievable amount of procs for this guy. Usually my understanding is if you do that, it will be 10 procs, but it does sort of depend on the other things you are able to do. Like if you actually activate the IWFS in there, it will be 10 procs. If you are playing the IWFS on the final turn of the game into a Jocasta Prodigy lane, I believe it will be 8. But the point, as usual, is it's just a ton of power. And Sunspot is the ceiling of this, where Thena is the sort of mid ceiling and Havoc is actually the low ceiling because he can only ever get 6 procs, and we can go above 6 procs a decent amount of the time. I think there is a reasonable argument that Hydra Bob here is vestigial and should be Spider Ham instead to optimize for those Jocasta games where you're using her as disruption. The reason I don't want to do that is because I really enjoy using Hydra Bob in my Jocasta lane to get a Prodigy down. So it's like you play either the IWFS or the Jocasta. You prioritize Jocasta usually, especially if you have both. But then you want to Prodigy something, which means you want it in that third slot, but you don't necessarily want to fill up to that point. And that's what I've really enjoyed this guy for. I also always seem to want Jocasta in slot 1 and care a lot about her slot economy, which makes me less interested in doing the Spider Ham stuff because I care so deeply about the investment in those slots. I could be overestimating just how many games this deck wins when it does its combo thing. I don't think I am, and maybe it is worth investing in the disruption regardless because of the way a deck like this can be vulnerable to specific tech cards like Danger, like Lady Deathstrike, like Cosmic Ghost Rider, and maybe needs an answer to that, or at least the chance at an answer to that. That's a compelling argument to me, and so I do think that if you wanted to try out a Spider Ham instead, that would be a very viable option. Athena gets big. She doesn't get as big as your absolute max sunspots, but it's not like impossible or even all that unlikely to be running around here with a Athena at about 25 power or something, give or take. You're getting a decent amount of like 6 proc Athenas. Sometimes you'll get some 8 proc Athenas. She's just there to be a vehicle for infinite IWFS procs that aren't actually infinite, but a lot of the time they're pretty close to it in terms of function. Havoc, because there are only 6 energy for him to eat, is actually unable to scale as high as the other ones. Now, that's not the end of the world. Like, you're going to play a lot of, like, 4 proc Invisible Woman games, in which case he is just very, very good, and you're not losing any value on him. But once you start, like, super comboing, you get up to, like, 8 to 10 procs when you're doing something like, you know, Jocasta into Invisible Woman first steps, Prodigy the Jocasta, activate all of them on the final turn of the game. He actually will be the smallest of your cards. And that's mostly down to the fact that everything else you're doing is really stupid. Mercury is a card that is mostly there because the decks that can really approach your point output probably play Human Torch, and you really don't want to let them play Human Torch. She's a fine enough card, and I've enjoyed having her in this list. Quick Herbie play tip. Whatever you activated on Herbie will be the thing that he keeps. This is relevant for Jocasta, and what it means, especially if you're prodigying a Jocasta, you're going to want to focus on that Herbie double a lot of the time. It's either click the double whenever you get it, or wait until turn 6. Those are basically the only 2 things you're doing with the Herbster in this deck. When you get that double locked in and you are somehow able to prodigy a Jocasta, Herbie just becomes another arbitrarily large guy. He gets absolutely massive, does a bunch of ridiculous stuff, very straightforward. Kate Bishop, the card I'm the least convinced by in this list, probably card 12 if I had to guess. I wouldn't actually be shocked if what you wanted to do was cut her for like an Electra or something of that nature, just to like beat mirrors even harder. It would not be a surprise to me. What she's doing is just giving you stuff to do. There are going to be games where you're not fully comboing off with Invisible Woman first steps. And in those games, I mean, hopefully you're comboing off with Omega Sentinel, but you still need some dudes. And Athena in those games is going to be like a large enough lady that she can win a lane on her own. You can't just always count on Omega Sentinel to do everything. So getting extra cards to play alongside your Athena or alongside your cards to scale up your Athena during the game actually does matter more, because you now have a viable way to win when you are not actually IWFSing to the max. You just need some points and some Omega Sentinel procs, right? And so that is what this card is helping you with. Jocasta adds a lot of power to this deck. And I think it's not a shocker necessarily that this deck got to this point. It was already like a pretty good deck that was slowly being power crept by other decks with better points packages. So having Jocasta and Omega Sentinel as a buff to the effective number of points it's able to create is a really powerful addition to this list. And I think it matters a ton. I'm not saying this is going to be like the best deck in the game forever, because the other thing you have to talk about with Jocasta is all the things that can go wrong. This deck absolutely eats it to Lady Deathstrike. It doesn't like seeing Killmonger either. There are some really embarrassing losses in my reel for like, oh, I'm going to have 50 points in 2 lanes, and then like, you know, my Sunspot gets Killmongered, or my Thena gets Lady Deathstruck, or this gets blown up. That's the kind of stuff that's going to stop you. And it really does matter. I shudder to think if this card released at 3-4, actually. Like, genuinely going to 3-3 was a really meaningful change for this card, because now it is extremely vulnerable to Lady Deathstrike. And that matters a lot, because that's a really good card against this deck. Mobius might be vestigial here, which is to say he might be just like a leftover from a previous era. Generally, the theory of a deck like this is you want to have a great points package, and you want to pair it with tech that hits the stuff that has better points packages than you. But I kind of don't know how many things actually do in the current metagame. When this deck works, it works. Like, there's a lot of numbers in it. And so I really, like, obviously, I still think Mobius is good enough to run, right? Like, you like having that safety. But the other thing about Mobius is he conflicts with your turns when you would be deploying your combo. And so a lot of the time it's like, all right, how scared am I? With Mr. Negative, it's like a really easy answer. I am more scared of what they can do than I am confident in my combo. But against a lot of other decks where Mobius is like marginally effective, I kind of don't think the answer is actually that easy. And that is something that really sticks out to me about playing this deck, is just how much you want to be playing other cards on 3, which is not true of the less combo invested versions of IWFS decks. Prodigy pretty much always wants to target Jocasta. You are very happy to be a Prodigy IWFS deck as well. That is your now secondary combo plan. The reason you want to Prodigy Jocasta is because while Jocastas will not activate infinitely, they will hit each other enough that you will get more out of it. Prodigying an Invisible Woman first steps and then playing a Jocasta in there, or having a Jocasta and 2 Invisible Woman first steps, is, I believe, less points than having 2 Jocastas and 1 Invisible Woman first steps. So that's basically where it's at. That's what you need to know about Prodigy. When you're going to go all in on one lane, he's the card you do it with. He's just very flexible in this list, though. Like, you are generally able to either combo off in a certain way or use him as like an extra Thena or something along those lines. In a pinch, he can just kind of do anything. And you do have to be planning your whole game for him to exist, so that does matter. But I think he's just been really great here. I realize that people are going to look at this and be like, KM, you just put this in an already good deck. But like, dude, I kind of think this is the best card at this slot. Like, I realize there are people playing Thing First Steps. I think it's better than Thing First Steps. And I'm the biggest Thing First Steps believer you will ever find. This is a card that combos absolutely insanely. It is your secondary win con, is just firing a bunch of Kamehamehas all over the board like your Goku. That is what this card does. If you have a Jocasta and a Prodigy on it, and you happen to draw this on the final turn of the game, chuck it in that lane, because that's still 4 lasers. Like, it's just great. The thing this deck gains over other versions of IWFS is that you can set up this Jocasta stuff even while you don't have the payoff in hand. And then on the final turn of the game, if you play the payoff, you still get it because of the way Jocasta works, right? Like, it is a ton of points. You are getting not only more freedom, but also more points. And like, I see people playing Thing First Steps, and I think if you're just doing that, you might as well just not, you just don't even want to be a Jocasta Prodigy deck at that point. If you're going to play Thing First Steps, just play the old list of this. Like, I genuinely believe that Thing First Steps really wants to be your turn 5. And this deck really wants your turn 5 to be Prodigying something really stupid. So it matters that this card costs 4. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one. We're about to jump into some gameplay. As always, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. I'll buy that. Denade's about to stat fuck me. About to get Viv visioned like a motherfucker. Oh, fuck. Hello. I do not know how many fires of Omega Sentinel this ends up being. I go for the Prodigy next turn. What do we think about this? Why Prodigy over IWFS? Because the Prodigy on the Jocasta gets me 3 Omega Sentinel procs. I think. Perfect. That guy's eating some Omega Sentinels. I don't know how many procs I've got here, but I think it's 1 middle and then 2 right, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. 1, 2, and then she hits another one on the Gladiator. Banger. Let's fucking go. But IW and Prodigy be more. No, that's just 1 proc. Ew. I don't have Herbie. Maybe I'll try Andy. I guess you maybe have to. Herbie's been kind of baller.
Live from the Daily Bugle.
More stuff is cool. Okay, so they didn't get my Mobius, at least, if that's the card they copied. They copied my Thena. Good to know. You ever call him the Herbler? I have never called him the Herbler. Notable.
Mjolnir, to me!
If I get Lady Deathstruck here, I'm quitting the game. Letting everyone know. Match. This is like the worst one by a whole bunch. But it is still a pretty decent amount of points. That works.
Face the might of Asgard. Mjolnir!
I mean, like, it's not the greatest thing ever, but, like, Jocasta, Omega Sentinel is 2 big lasers. And then we just have enough points on the 2 side lanes. Whoa! Whoa! Holy fuck. Holy fuck. It's like how when, it's like how you're extremely likely to run into somebody who has the same birthday as you. It's a bit like that, I think. Like, if you get, I think, however many people in a room, by the time you hit the 17th person, that's the person who is likely to have the same birthday as you. And Pixie Chef, no, I'm not doing that. Sorry, I'm not taking time out of my stream to go do some fucking work for you. No offense. $23 people. Yeah, that's what it is. Snap and win. The problem is, I think... Oh, no, there is no problem. Yeah, I snap and win.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for putting the Havoc on the right lane. And that guy stays over there now. So, you know, not ideal. But even if he was back over here with a fat 17 power, don't think it matters that much.
Victory.
We're actually, no joke, gonna win there. Pain. America Chavez. Oh, fuck. They didn't get anything off of it, right? We don't have to Mobius anything? Base Sarah. Yeah, I buy it. Respectable. Yep. Look at that.